to introduce, well, I'm Nicole Morris, just so for those of you who don't know me. And I'm one of the two professors in the Virginia area here. And Virginia is hosting a visiting artist this week, Sean Caulfield. And he has been with us here this week, working with our classes, doing a variety of workshops on some fancy printmaking methods called chevrolet/collage, and also working with the steamroller class to learn how to do large-scale wheat pasting and things of that nature. So they've had a really good time, and I think they're learning a lot. So a little bit about Sean. I won't get into too much detail because I know how boring that can get. He is currently a professor from the Department of Art and Design at the University of Alberta, so he comes all the way from Canada. He has exhibited his prints, drawings, installations, and artist books extensively throughout Canada, the United States, Europe, Japan, so his work has been everywhere. A couple of recent exhibitions include A Tragedy at the Commons at, now I have to figure out how to say this, Elsie Rosie Gallery in Birmingham University, New York. Found Anatomies at Peter Robertson Gallery in Edmonton, Alberta, again in Canada. Hybrid Landscapes at Terrain Gallery in Spokane, Washington, and he's got some upcoming exhibitions this next year in North Carolina and a solo show in Poland. So he, is someone to keep your eye on. We brought him here because we love his work, so we're very happy to have him here. He's had numerous grants and awards. His work is in numerous collections, such as Houghton Library, Harvard University, Fitzwilliam Museum, Cambridge, England, the Blanton Museum of Art, University of Texas, Austin. So, he does good stuff. So help me welcome him again.
Thank you very much for that introduction. Can everyone hear me okay? Mike's good. I want to start out with a huge thanks to Nicole, Patricia, the School of Art, for making our effort. It's been great to be here. It's been a wonderful week. I'm excited to share. So, is there anything more beautiful than steamroller? I don't think so. There is one thing that's more beautiful, a woodcut of the steamroller, right? And there's one thing yet more beautiful, a steamroller print event. So this is an interesting thing. And when we look at a steamroller, what do we think about? I think about labor. And I think about labor unions. And all of a sudden, politics, right? So that's one side of it. And then the steamroller event is kind of absurd, right? Hey, what are we doing here? We have the world of the absurd, we have the world of dreams, we have the world of danger. Those things could run over you, flatten you. So there's kind of two sides to this event that's coming up, and I know what you're thinking. He's setting up the binary, the rational, irrational. There's problems with that, but let's hold that for a moment. This is kind of an aside. Circus posters. Oh, I should mention that was a clown from 1950, and these are circus posters from 1944. Oh, and sorry, that woodcut in the beginning. ChatGPT told me that the top text is Latin and the bottom text is Dutch. And I don't say that lightly. That's a big conversation. And we'll maybe dovetail into what we're going to talk about later. Okay, so I'm an artist that's interested in art history. I don't have a PhD. I'm not an art historian, I wouldn't say, but I'm very, very interested in history and art history. And I'm someone that likes to look back at history and see how we can maybe think about that and how it touches on contemporary society. And this is an image and a place I'm very interested in. So first, audience participation. You may know this image, but I want someone to tell me, where are we?
Hell.
Gold star. We're in hell. But we're in a very specific place in hell. Does anyone know? No. Specific place in hell, yes. Paradise? I'm not sure what that is. I'll tell you. It's the gates of hell. So, the entrance and exit to a place of suffering. So I want to dive into this story a little bit before we get into my work. I see as a kind of analogy to think through some things. I want to say, though, this is an image that sits in my mind at the heart of kind of Western religious, intellectual, and cultural thought. And as such, there's lots we can critique about it. Lots of questions we can ask, lots of things we can sort of trouble, if you will. And again, I'm going to tell my story of this. It's an old story. You might have a different thought about what the story means, etc. So let's dive in. So I want to get back, I want to get back to the scene. I want to get back to who those characters are. You might already know. But before I do that, I want to step one scene back. And first of all, we have to ask ourselves, does anyone know who drew these images?
William Blake.
Thank you. William Blake, 1802. And does anyone know what he was illustrating? What story he was illustrating?
Dante.
Good try. He did do some Dante, but it's not Dante. These are illustrations of Milton's Paradise Lost. Okay? And that was written in 1667. So 1882, William Blake is making these images. He's collaborating in a way with Milton, who wrote Paradise Lost in 1667. Okay. So we saw that scene of hell. We step back a scene. And I want you all, I'm going to watch. I'm going to ask you to close your eyes, but you got to open them and not stay asleep. Close your eyes. And imagine you're having the most delicious sleep. It's Sunday afternoon. You know the sleep I'm talking about. You don't want to get up. The alarm goes up. Eyes open. Guess where you are? A lake of fire. You're in a lake of fire. This is what happens in Milton's Paradise Lost. The rebel angels are thrown out of heaven and they wake up in a lake of fire. And for me, this is a kind of, pretty obvious metaphor about the fact that we live in suffering. Right? This is the problem of suffering. Okay, so what do? They wake up, they get out of the lake of fire. What's the first thing you do when you get out of the lake of fire? You decide to have a debate. Right? And you decide to have a discussion. So that's what they do. And the first demon, whose name is Moloch, hope I have that right, Moloch, his answer to the problem of suffering, his answer to being in the state of suffering, does anyone want to guess? He's the first one to speak.
Sin.
You're close. Here's what he says. He says, my sentence is for open war. So his response is violence. You were thrown down in violence, how do you respond? More violence. The answer to suffering, the answer to pain is violence. And this is a, very dark thought. It's, for those in the advanced class, we had a similar discussion today about Plato, right? And that first person that spoke in Light of the Republic, who said, there is no good, there's only power. Whoever has the most violence, right? So that's his response. It's very dark. And now we come to one of my images. This is a lino cut. It is 36 by 48. And it is a collaborative work. I made the image, black and white lino cut. I wanted it to be bold, graphic. I wanted it to feel roughly like the size of a circus poster, a kind of activist image. And on the bottom is text written by Professor Stephen Hoffman from York University. The typography is done by another colleague, Sue Colbert, so it's a kind of a collaborative effort. And the bottom says, fights are stopped quickly with fight-stopping tools. Okay, 2 people. What's a fight-stopping tool?
Chokehold.
What's that?
A chokehold?
Okay, yeah, so you're thinking of a person to person, right? And it's an act of violence, but one that is not as aggressive. One more.
Diplomacy.
Diplomacy, yeah.
I was gonna say word.
Yeah.
Yeah, discussion.
Sanctions. That seems to be working very well. You had a thought?
I was gonna say communication.
Yeah. I've got one. Art. So this is part of a series of 8 works. They all are text and image combinations. And we're going to go through several of them. But we got to get back to our story. The second demon gets up. His name is Belia. I hope I'm saying that. And his, well, anyone want to, in this debate, what his suggestion is? Anyone want to? First person, violence. Second person is,
Repent.
okay?
Repent.
It's not as nice as that.
Revolution.
No?
Maybe like bribery or trickery?
That's more close. His response is, don't do anything. Things are bad. They could get worse. Violence just makes more violence. You think it's bad now, you engage in violence, it's going to be worse. Don't do anything. That's the answer. And the one way he puts it, counsel a noble ease and peaceful sloth. So it's a kind of like, right? Second piece in the series, cheaters are punished when they break the rules. So this, someone said, bribery, and sort of thing. In my hometown in Edmonton, Alberta, for the first time in my, well, not the first time, I guess for the last 8 years, I now have to check the air index to see if my daughter can go outside in the summer. Because the air quality is so bad from forest fires. Does that happen here? And this is deeply concerned. From us. So this is a big topic. Okay, don't worry, there's only 4 days, so. Well, there's 5. But. Okay, 4th one stands up. And his name is Mammon. And they're all males. Anyone want to guess what Mammon's? We have violence. We have don't do anything. What's that?
Pay them off.
Bribery?
Greed.
Greed?
Greed.
Greed?
Greed.
Oh, greed, okay. No, actually, this one's an interesting one. It's like, we've got power, we've got ability, we've got minds, we're rational. We can fix this. We can make it better. Don't worry about that. I know there's trouble here, but let's put our minds together. We can make it better. We can build houses or weird things in hell, whatever we build in hell. And we can make it better. Progress. We're rational. And there's something to that, right? How does he put it? But rather seek our own good from ourselves and from our own live to ourselves. As our darkness cannot be his light, imitate what we please. So this idea is, you have the capacity to deal with this and take ourselves out of suffering, in other words, right? Okay. A third piece in the series. The text is, you must know which things need our protection. I asked some of the classes already this, but I'll just ask them, what needs our protection?
Nature.
Nature?
Yeah.
Planet? Did you say?
Children.
Children?
People.
Animals.
Freedom. Did you say freedom? Freedom, you said. Here's this thought. This is the challenge, right? What I said to all the classes as a joke is we need to protect our right to have pickup trucks. And I'm not joking. I mean, this is the challenge. A lot of these questions around environmental protection, this comes with state restrictions, right? And this is the loggerheads of these. Okay. So all of this work you're seeing, as I noted, was part of a bigger collaboration. And actually it started even as a bigger collaboration. I was invited to work in a really large interdisciplinary group that brought together artists, social scientists, scientists, humanists, and we were looking at the theme of energy transition. So the person I paired with, Stephen Hoffman, he wrote a children's book, kind of as a homage to the laureates, and we made an artist book together. But these 8 points were how the book concluded. And what he was thinking through, and what he wanted to try to convey in this artist book, was the question of a tragedy of the commons. You heard that earlier in one of my shows. Does anyone know what a tragedy of the commons is? I think someone said it in the classes earlier. Yeah.
A shared resource won't necessarily be protected by everyone who uses it.
Exactly. So you have a forest, you have people living all around the forest, and if someone doesn't manage that, all the trees are right? So he wanted to speak to this. And typically, in economics, this is kind of a simplification, I'm not an economist either, but my understanding is typically in economics we talk about 2 ways we don't have this problem arise. And one of them is what? Government, the state. The state gets involved and said, we've got ways to control this. There's another way.
Private property.
Private property, thank you. Right. So these are typically the 2 ways we try to control this, right? He was trained to an economist named Eleanor Ostrom, the first woman to win the Nobel Prize in economics. And she theorized about another way that sat outside the private property of the state. And this is a kind of distillation of her theory. If we follow these, if you will, rules, principles, this is a way we can deal with the tragedy of commons outside of these 2 problems. Does that kind of make sense? And so that's what we worked on together. He wrote this first, and then I responded with these kind of big text. Every one of them I think is interesting because every one of them, to my mind, is sort of straightforward. Of course we need to protect nature and children and that. But again, once you start to think about it, it has all these problems in there. Cheaters are punished when we break the rules. Who punishes who? How do we decide what's cheating, etc., etc. They're simple, but they embody, I think, very complex kind of tensions. The other thing about all of them is, to some degree, they will result in coercion. Right? I mean, on some level, if you're going to, and maybe that's how societies have to function, there has to be some level of coercion going on. All right. This is another one from the series, Rules for Sharing that we make together. You take a cake, I cut it in half, you decide which piece you want, right? That's a rule for sharing. I grew up in rural Alberta. I've asked many of the classes already, so those that heard this don't answer, but what is the main export of Alberta? Lumber's on the table. Oil, that's right. It is a massive industry. My father was in the oil industry. My brother's in the oil industry. It's an enormous generator of economic growth, but bringing up all sorts of environmental questions. Right? I grew up in the prairie. It's beautiful. All this stuff. I mean, there was all these sorts of industrial forms kind of bubbling out of the landscape, and they really grew as I grew up. And I became very interested in them, and the way these are kind of industrial, and some of it was agricultural too, kind of merged with the landscape is something that's been an ongoing interest of mine, in addition to this kind of thinking that I'm talking about. Okay, so I'm going to step outside that other series a little bit and talk about some other work. This is a woodcut installation I did in the Art Gallery of Alberta. And I mentioned that theme of wildfires. I just wanted to make a really big, impactful piece that spoke about that. And in fact, when this went up at the Art Gallery, there was a big fire up in places called Fort McMurray, all sorts of houses were. And there was an interesting, kind of discussion of this moving up at that time. This gives you a sense of its scale. And so, this was a question for me. I talked about the kind of, the steamroller print, the spectacular spectacle. I thought maybe it's interesting to try and make something that's on such a big scale that you kind of can go around with the viewer. Some additional examples of that. Obviously, as a printmaker, I make blocks and I tend to print from them. But increasingly, I became interested in the blocks themselves as a kind of object. So that, the previous one you saw, these are the blocks, not actually print from the blocks. And of course, I did print these as well, so I had both going on. And sometimes I paste up the blocks in public space, but in this case, it's the blocks. And then likewise, here, that's the blocks. And then I became interested in, well, what if some of these forms became three-dimensional? And I don't really know why I became interested in that, except to say maybe already woodcut has a sculptural quality. And also just sort of thinking through the affect of that. How does that kind of affect the viewer? Do they get kind of more engaged with the work, or differently engaged with the work? So this is a sort of two-piece work. You have the carved relief on top, this, and then an actual sculptural object. There's the larger installation, and a further kind of sculptural object. So you kind of, as a viewer, all three of those work. Okay, we're back. We're in where?
No.
And we're not just in hell, we're at the So this part of the story is quite difficult, it's quite violent. I mean, the whole story's violent, but I just kind of, warning, it's not a pleasant thing that happened here. I also want to note, Milton, who wrote this, you may know, lived during the English Civil War. This was an extremely violent period. And he was in the government, a part of the government during this period. So the story also comes out of a kind of period of violence, right? Okay. Who's that? Someone's got to guess. Yes?
Is it Mammon?
No, but good try. I will give a hint. It's not any of the demons I've already mentioned. So I should have said that. But you're close, very close.
Gabriel?
No. Good try, close as well, very close. Satan. And I want to say, this, of course, it's a woman, and this is a big thing that needs to be critiqued and underscored. But who is it?
Is it Lilith?
No.
But
It's a personification of something.
Is it? It's Satan. Oh, okay.
Personification.
Jezebel?
You're so close.
Eve.
No,
Lost?
so close. Starts with an S.
Sex. Sex. No,
You
succubus?
close?
Sid.
Sid. Sid. Again. So, super problematic. Sin is personified by the woman. You can go on. Sadness. We have Satan, sin.
Jesus.
In fairness, you're close. In a way.
Saint Mike.
Again, it's a personification.
Good.
No.
Corruption.
No.
Justice.
Begins with a D.
Dead.
Dead. So we have sin, Satan, and death. Now, it gets complicated. Satan, when he was in heaven, planning his various things, suddenly he felt a pain in his head. And guess who gave birth to him? And guess what happened? And guess who they gave birth to?
Yeah.
So it's a very messy thing. And when Satan arrives at the gates of hell, these two are going to kill each other. And she gets in the way and stuff. So getting back to our story, my work, one thing I think about here is very interesting what Milton did. On the one hand, he has this rational debate. It goes through the problems of suffering, goes through how we might respond politically, And then he gets here. And it's like, all that doesn't matter. What really drives us is fear of death, desire, sexual desire, and lust for power. That's really all that drives humans. Again, very dark stuff. So, I'm probably have 2 minutes left. No, I'm not doing that. All of this makes me think about something we're very familiar with. Probably. Does anyone know who made this painting? Max Ernst. You got it. Don't start. You know what year?
1940s?
You're close. 1940. Not close.
My hopes.
1921. And we're think, probably familiar with surrealism, a moment in history where artists are responding to the horror of World War I, like 1921, right? And also to psychoanalysis, right? And there's much to be said that we could be critical of psychoanalysis. I'm very aware of that. I totally understand that. And yet, there's something there, right? And it's something to do with that image we just saw, how these kind of very deep-rooted things, anxiety, fear, desire, drive, and decision. And how they then meet our efforts to organize society and to respond to things like environmental change, etc. This image is called The Elephant Celebrates, from 1921. So, what else was happening in 1921 to, say, 1935? That was happening, but in Europe, what was happening? Right, we have the rise of fascism. And the surrealists are like very political. They're trying to respond to this. And their interest in the subconscious, in dreams, in the irrational, is very much a political response to that kind of moment in history. Okay, so this is the other side of what I do. I'm also a sculptor, and these are some of my works. They came out of that moment when I was starting, sort of bridging print and sculpture, and then all of a sudden I said, well, I just got to start making real sculpture. And, but I'm still kind of stuck on the wall, you can see. But for me, I'm drawing on those ideas, drawing on that interest I have in the kind of language of print and the themes that I'm exploring in those line of lists. But I try to explore these in a much more kind of open-ended way. I'm just going to the studio, yes, use intuition, use chance, the kinds of things I was just referring to create forms that I hope are somewhat dreamlike, that are mysterious, that evoke a kind of wide range of emotions, including, like, on the one hand, being maybe somewhat humorous, but perhaps also anxious in there. Another shot, washed out, sorry. Sometimes I exhibit them as kind of groupings, and I'm very much leaning into things I've seen the surrealists do. I'm also interested in, like, museum kind of display, the way they might display a kind of thing, in an attempt to kind of organize it so it's understandable. But in my case, it's like I try to do that as a reference, but it's kind of discombobulated in a much more kind of dreamlike thing. Some of the images, some of the sculptures will have actual print on them. I'll start with actually a printed surface and then kind of build out. Other times I'll have still two-dimensional. Well, they're actually sculptural because they're wood, but they're very much image-based, and I'll try to mix those things together. These two elements are laser-cut images, and they have on them, they're appropriated images from 1543, from another important moment in print history, the publishing by Vesalius of a book of anatomy called On the Fabric of the Human Body. And this was a really important book that kind of looked at anatomy in a new way and introduced different ways of dissection and thinking about the body. There's a whole kind of complex history there we can talk about. But I'm drawing on those to start them. And then many of the actual figures start with the Vesalius form, and then I'll build around it. Okay. Just a little shot on, this is what the studio looks like on the sculpture side. And so those sculptures are made with an armature that's just paper and paper mache. And I just slowly build wood around that and kind of build from there. And I wanted to share this, again, getting back to this notion of working in intuition, in kind of chance ways, in drawing on that kind of strategy. I'll just kind of start building. Often they'll have a figurative reference, but I'll let them kind of freely kind of oftentimes, I will exhibit the two together. And I think you can probably get now, in a way to kind of speak to this tension I was talking about in the story, okay? On the one hand, works that are political, they're about activism, about action, and then a response, hopefully, that sits more in the world of kind of dreams and imaginations. And think about that tension. Okay. Last segment here, going back in history again. The print students, I think most of them know this already, so the non-print students know who made this image? Sure. Yes. What year? That happened?
1490 to 1510, somewhere
Thank you.
there.
1495. And you probably know what's going to happen. What's going to happen in 1500?
Where?
Europe.
Lots of things happen.
What's going to happen? It's 1495, and you're looking ahead in 1500. What's going to happen? You know what's going to happen?
Like?
The world's going to end.
Oh, the world ended in year 1002.
Yes. So you probably know this is from him during the Book of Revelations, 1495. Correct me at any point if I get anything wrong. But there was a lot of talk, and who knows how much people really believed it, but about the end world after 1500. Okay. How many heads on this dragon? Seven heads. Okay, there's 7 heads on that dragon. What a weird image, right? Talk about surrealism. I want to get the date right. This is from 1517. And what has happened in Germany at this point? Yeah, Protestant Reformation, right? There's this very disruptive and complex thing that unfolds. Partly brought on by what? Martin Luther, but something else that's just...
The 95 theses?
Yes, but there's something in printmaking that happened that's a bad idea. You don't want this.
Oh, the printing press.
Printing press, yes. And movable type. Don't use that stuff. That is bad news, right? Brings all kinds of trouble. How many heads do we have here? Whose head is that? Martin Luther. We saw an earlier image of Durer, a dragon with 7 heads. That's a reference to the Book of Revelations, and it's a reference to evil. And this is a bad thing. So this is an image that's really, Luther is evil. He's got 7 heads. This is bad. I wanted to share this because, to me, this is a really interesting image. If I didn't know that, and at first I didn't know all that history, I found it compelling. It's an amazing, interesting image. But it was a political image, and it was an image we might call propaganda, right? What's the line between art and propaganda? And when people saw this, I'm sure at that period, they instantly, likely knew, okay, this means this, right? It's not an image that asks you to think, right? In the way it tells you. At least I would maybe suggest that. Okay, so that was 1517. This one is, sorry, that was 1529. The image of Luther was 1529. This one is 1530. And what do we see in the middle there? And who's those heads? Who's the central head? So what did the Protestants do in response? They made their own propaganda. So we have these 2 images, only 2 years apart. So here we have print as propaganda, print as political activism, and that question of what is art and what is print. I think it's super interesting. This might seem, I don't know, out of date, old-fashioned, but it seems awful relevant to me right now. Terribly relevant. Yes?
Whose legs are spread open at the bottom?
That is an excellent question. And I don't even want to go there. I mean, again, talk about the surreal, right? And creating an image that's uncomfortable and grotesque. I've done a little bit of research on this. I know that this is meant to reference papacy and the Catholic Church. I don't know what's going on. But you're right, it's powerful and visceral, and it contributes to a sense of kind of revulsion, right? To the police, the month. Okay. I'll do it. Perfect, got 6 minutes. So one of the things in this series I tried to do, and I don't know if I succeeded, was, on the one hand, I think Stephen's text is quite strong, quite direct, makes you think in a way that's directed. At the same time, as I alluded to earlier, I'm drawn to it because it doesn't answer things for you. It kind of is a projection. I tried to respond in light with images that were, committed to a sort of position. That were kind of activists and flavor, but at the same time didn't do it those images of Luther and the Catholic Church did. I hope they're not telling you what to think. Right? And this is a kind of tension that I think is interesting when you think about activism or art that engages in kind of political. How can you do it in a way that takes a stance, but it doesn't tell you what to do? And this is a difficult problem to learn, and a good problem to learn, but one that's, I think, easy to get quite wrong. Okay, I'm just going to wrap up now, and then I'll turn it over to questions if there are any. I just want to end with some side projects. I'm also, in addition to this kind of more activist work, if you will, I'm also interested, as I alluded to, in the history of print and scientific illustration. And I do lots of work where I collaborate with biomedical researchers, scientists, and make work in that vein too. And I don't have time to maybe talk about it, but I do want to share two. These are from a project where I worked with a group of researchers and we looked at the themes of vaccines. And here we, again, have a very kind of potentially polarizing topic. And we wanted to explore that and think to it. And so the bottom image, again, I'm appropriating the Salius, and then doing my own kind of drawing at the top. And I created several of these that are sort of book-like works. They are silkscreen, so these are the silkscreen images I mentioned, and inkjet. Okay. Oops. Yeah. Last group of images. Just before coming here, I was at a residency in northern Quebec, or sorry, in rural Quebec, in the eastern township, not northern Quebec, southern Quebec, actually, just above Maine and Denmark. And it's a super rural place, like they still have bears. It was great. But in that very rural environment, we're trying to create this kind of cultural center. In fact, they're succeeding. It's a really interesting place. And I was invited to make a work on a kind of abandoned barn type structure. And I started the talk with those circus posters on it. And I said, okay, this is what I want to do. I want to create a work that feels like that. A circus poster announcing something, but when you spend time with it, it's this kind of very surreal, dream-like work. The students also did this work, the advanced class, and some of you maybe saw it up in the crit room, and so we had a lot of fun, at least I had a lot of fun, and we did another version of this, just a very quick paste-up project here in school. There's another view of it. And this is actually mid-work. I ended up actually working kind of a full surface, but it gives you a sense of what we're after. The theme of the residency is territory. And I asked one of the groups, we talked about territory during the week. And this is a very interesting, complex idea, right, territory. And we had a kind of round table, and it was great. My French is not great, but it was interesting to hear, you know, these are people that are working in agriculture, working on the farm, working in lumber, and they're thinking about territory. And so it was a great dialogue. And this is the first time I've done this. What happens if these guys go outside? And that's sort of interesting. Yeah, I'll welcome feedback on that. And then here's my Frostic studio at this residency. I got 1:41 left. I guess I'm done.